If you use a kayak trolling motor, you may want to consider upgrading to a lithium battery versus the traditional lead acid marine deep cycle. And I'm going to tell you why. Stay tuned. Here we are, Hack Central here in Wilmington, North Carolina, where I've got a lot going on. I'm working on another hack from Rick that involves straps and PVC. I'll get to that in another video, but what I want to talk to you about in this one is lithium batteries versus traditional marine deep cycle batteries for your kayak trolling motor. Now, Rebel Batteries, a disabled veteran-owned company out in Texas, sent me this lithium ion phosphate 100 amp hour battery. And in return, I sent them one of the very valuable copies of my dad's book. This is the leather-bound, signed by both authors, of We Were Soldiers Once and Young. You may have seen the movie We Were Soldiers back in 2002. So I think it was a fair trade. Now, Rebel sells lithium batteries, because I know cost is an issue with everybody, ranging in price from $69 up to $549 for something that we'd be interested in our kayak trolling motor. But the issue, of course, is how long that is going to last versus a deep cycle battery. So let's get into the pros and cons of why you might want to go with lithium versus this one. So let's look at 4 criteria when you're evaluating lithium versus traditional marine deep cycle. And those should be weight, power, lifespan, and charging time. So weight is pretty obvious. These things are pretty light. And if I was a bulky guy like Steve Sharon on the Adventure Outdoors channel, I'd be able to lift this up with one hand easily because he's an alpha male. But it takes 2 men and a boy to lift up this one right here. This sucker's heavy. So what do you want on your kayak? Something that weighs 25 pounds or something that weighs 60 pounds or more? Because every pound of weight you put on the kayak translates to reduced range as your trolling motor's got to push that bulk through the water. So weight, obviously, the head nod goes to lithium. So what about power? Well, that goes to how much consistent power you can get out of each of these batteries. With a lithium battery, lithium phosphate, you can get continuous power all the way down until it's fully discharged. Whereas on a lead acid battery, once it gets down to 50% or less, the power drops off, and in fact, it may not even push your trolling motor once it gets to that level. It's called depth of discharge. I want to look at this depth of discharge and available capacity issue just a little bit more to make sure you really understand what the advantage is of this Rebel lithium battery. This thing is rated at 100 amp hours. I know that I can discharge that in an emergency situation all the way down to 0 and have no problems with it. Granted, on a typical usage basis, 80 to 85% discharge is probably what you ought to shoot at. But what that means is, on a 100 amp hour battery, I can get 100 amp hours. And typically I can get 80 to 85 amp hours. But given the usable capacity of a lead acid battery, on that same 100 amp hour battery, I'd be lucky to get 65 amp hours out of that. So now think of what that means to you in terms of the distance this thing can push you and how far you can get away from the boat launch and all the rest of that pressure. And depth of discharge has an impact on the lifespan as well. If you consistently discharge your lead acid battery down below 50% or less, you're going to reduce the number of cycles you can recharge it. I saw one graph and discussion on the internet that indicated that if you do this down to below 50%, you're only going to get 200 cycles of charging on it. Not so with lithium. It'll tolerate the 100% discharge, and you can get between 2,000 and 10,000 recharge cycles on it, depending on who you want to watch and look at on the internet. Let's talk about charging now. There's no multi-stage charging with a lithium battery. The current flows in there, it tops off, gets to 100%, and that's why this thing can be charged in 2 hours or so. Whereas with a lead acid battery, there are stages to get up to 100% charge, and that's why it takes so much longer with this. So if you want to get yourself recharged quickly, you need one of these lithium batteries. And while we're talking about charging and discharging, a lithium battery will only lose 2% of its charge every month if it's not hooked up to a charger, whereas a lead acid could lose up to 30% of its charge every month, and that could get you down to that danger zone of being so discharged that you've reduced the lifespan of this particular unit. So the bottom line is you can get 4 times, maybe even 5 times the life out of this thing as you can get out of the traditional marine deep cycle battery. So when you divide that into the cost, now you're starting to really kind of put these things on an equivalent footing. This thing costs $130. The price on this, on Rebel batteries, was $549. So you can see 4 or 5 times this puts me directly into the price range. And now I've got a battery that only weighs 25 pounds and has consistent power output all the way down to basically 0 discharge, although I wouldn't recommend discharging these more than 80%. So that brings up the next great advantage, particularly of these Rebel batteries, is that how do you know how much you've used? Because that translates to how can you get back to the boat launch? You want to know what the exact level of charge is in this. And that's where this thing has a great advantage. There's an app that works with this that tells you a lot of the status. Let me switch over and I'll show you what it looks like on my iPhone. This is pretty cool. When I want to know what's going on in this battery, I just pop this button and it turns on Bluetooth from the battery to the app on my iPhone. Let me show you what it looks like on the iPhone. So I just click on the app on the iPhone, I click on the battery, and then it loads all the data, and you can see it comes in, and right now it's telling me that this lithium battery is only 86% charged. So imagine you're on a trip, you can watch this go down and down and down, and then know exactly how far you've got in terms of remaining range. Pretty cool app. And I guess the next thing to chat about a little bit is safety. In this battery, it's not a sealed unit. It's got the old traditional cells in there that I got to top off the water in, which means that I could tip this and get acid all over the place. With the lithium battery, it's totally sealed, ready to go, and the operating range of this is really wide. So I don't have to worry about this thing overheating with the sun beating down on it in the back of my kayak. Clearly, lithium is the way to go. There you go. All the information you need to know to have a good day on the water and not run out of juice. So as you can tell, I've switched. I'm good for this one. And you can see it's easy to pick up with 2 hands, even with an old guy. Yeah, I can do curls with this. Do you guys have experience using lithium batteries with your kayak trolling motor? What have you learned? Throw the tips and tricks down below. Thanks.